And we're live. You are watching Coaching Chats with Marina and Caroline.
I'm Marina Baranowski of the Coaching Marina.
And I am Caroline Day with Safe Day to Change. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for today. Today, we're going
Yes.
to talk about a really beautiful topic, one that is dear to my heart. And that
Mhm.
topic is trust.
Yes.
So, how do you feel about the word trust? What does that mean to you?
Trust encapsulates so much for me. It really is the core of my work on myself and the core with my clients. So this is a huge, huge topic. I love this
Yeah.
so much. Yeah. So much.
Me too, because it can mean so many things, right? And I think
Right.
before we came live, we actually kind of talked about this a little bit
Yeah.
because trust has so many different meanings. We're going to try to break it down so that it serves the audience in multiple cases.
Yeah.
So we will start with the kind of like the self-trust and what that means. So why don't you start, Marina? What does that mean to trust yourself?
Well, self-trust for me is believing that you can handle what happens, listening to your inner thoughts and signals, and knowing that you won't abandon yourself.
Mm,
Now, what I mean with that also is that doesn't mean that you aren't always confident or you don't have to be right or that you're never going to make mistakes. It's just believing that you can handle whatever happens.
I see. I love that
Yeah.
because self-trust to me is very similar, right? Self-trust means when I think of trust, and I have actually done a presentation before on that, it's kind of like when you're first starting to ride a bike. First, you have to believe that you can do it to begin with. You have to believe that there is a possibility that you can learn, right? And so there's a first belief that it's possible, not impossible. So you have to believe it's possible. And then you have to believe in your own capability. You have to believe to say, well, maybe if I can watch somebody, I can do it. And no matter how many iterations, how many times I do it, I believe that there is a way where I can achieve success in this, right? And like you were saying, like even if I fall, right, it doesn't mean that I can't do it. I can keep going. And I think it has also, trust. I love the word trust because there's also a part of it that is related to luck, because there in trust, there is, certainty, and then he has uncertainty. And I think trust is managing the level of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And because when you trust, you don't really know. You believe that you can do it, but you don't really know. And so there's that level of faith and trust when you do it because some of it is known. You know some of the work, you know the process of learning how to ride a bike, but you don't really know if you're capable until you do it, right?
Right.
There's that level of faith. And I really like that about trust.
I like that too. It's a great way to frame it. Having trust in yourself that you can accomplish something. You don't know how you're going to do it. But you know that you're going to do it one way or another, and you can fall but you're going to get back up and you're still going to do it. I love that so much.
Yeah. And there's a difference now that you mention it, right? There's those things that you have seen other people do it. And so it gives you a little bit of hope because you know it's possible, right? You've seen
Yeah.
the outcome, you know it's possible. You just don't know if it's possible for you, but you know that the process has been done. I think it's harder when you are going to do something that has never been done or something that you're completely unfamiliar with the results
Right.
because now the level of hope goes down because you don't know if it's actually possible, right? When you're trying to come up with your first airplane, right? Or the first lamp, whatever it is, right? Your first invention, you don't really know the results because it's never been done or you've never heard of somebody doing it. And so I think that there's even more trust that needs to be there um, and because you don't know what the outcome is. So that's
Yeah,
actually interesting.
I like that so much. So, how do you, and I guess here's the question, it starts with self, right? This self-trust piece. Where do you learn it from, and when does that get broken?
Yeah, I love that question because I was watching one of my favorite coaches talk on Instagram the other day. Her name is Martha Beck. She wrote a book called The Way of Integrity, and it's a beautiful book. I highly recommend. It's for people that are really struggling with where they are now. She talks about the middle,
Mm.
um, where you're no longer who you are, but you're not yet where you want to be. And then she talks about like that travel, and she uses the metaphor of a butterfly, where you transform and you're thinking that you're dying, but you're really transforming into a beautiful butterfly. And that's really beautiful. And she said something that I thought was very important, which is about your parents. You don't act how your parents want you to act, or you don't behave the way they want you to behave or what they're telling you to behave. And you don't treat yourself the way they treat you. You treat yourself the way they treat themselves. And I thought that was huge, because they can say, honey, you're amazing, you're beautiful, and try to develop a level of trust on you. But if they are telling themselves, I'm ugly, I don't deserve anything, I'm so dumb, that's what they're watching.
Yeah,
Not what you're telling them. It's what not what they're telling you, but what they're telling themselves. And I wish I had learned that early on,
right,
because when you watch your parents treat themselves, it's completely different than the way they're treating you sometimes. But it's really the way you're mimicking in life,
yeah,
because they're doing something and they're watching, and so you're watching it, right? So trust comes very early on,
yeah,
trusting in self, because depending on how your parents treated themselves, that's who you're going to mirror. Wow,
mm,
maybe like if they're not confident, if they need another layer of makeup, if they need to completely transform themselves, when somebody shows up at the door, then you mimic that. You're like, okay, then I have to do that. I have to hide myself to present as a different person when somebody comes in, because they're watching. And I feel like that's where trust first comes in. What
I
do you
agree
think?
with you. Yeah, I know, I totally agree. And let's take it to the next level. So, even though you may have had, even as a child, you may have had signs of your intuition, right? But you ignore them to please the others, to please your parents, to please the friends around you. You would say, sometimes it turns into saying yes to things that when you don't want to do them, or, staying in situations that don't feel right because you're trusting someone else's view of things or opinion of things, and fear of disappointing your parents or fear of anything might rise up at that point, even though you may have your own knowing that is coming up. You're not trusting yourself at that point because you're looking at, especially when you're young, you're looking to others for direction, and
Right.
that changes you in how you trust yourself.
100%. And that's normal, right? Because when they're kids, they don't know anything.
Right.
And so they're navigating life by fully trusting their parents or their caregivers. And then it changes in adolescent. They
Yeah.
trust less of what the parents are saying and more of what the friends and the community are saying, which is why it's so important for kids to be in healthy communities, because at a certain age, they're going to stop listening to the parents, or at least listen to their friends more
Right.
than what they would. But I did read that regardless of who they listen to, parents still have a heavy influence on the kids, even if they don't admit it. And
Very
so
true.
a good relationship or, a level of trust with your parents is essential. So let's talk about when this trust is broken,
Mm.
right? Because there is a lot of self-trust when you believe in your capability or you're learning from someone else. But what happens when you actually trust, and that trust is broken?
Well, let's start with, I guess, I'll take of my own one of my own experiences, which is I trusted someone else implicitly. I trusted someone else because I didn't trust myself enough to move to make decisions. So I trusted those decision making or those moves to someone else because I believed that their intuition or their trust in self was greater than my own.
Okay, give me an example. When was that?
This was, many years ago, probably in an early relationship. I would say I could tie it to my first marriage, where I didn't have enough trust in my own self in decisions and how to move forward. And I felt that handing over those responsibilities to my husband, and this is all in my mind, right? This is not like, okay, you make the decisions. That's it. I listen to everything that he said in the way that he wanted to move through life. And I said, well, he knows better than me. I don't
Mm,
know where that came up or why that came up, but it was something that I gave to him as I entrusted our life together to him
hmm
instead of having any say or any thought process. It was very much I trusted him completely. Um, and the lesson here is when he did disappoint or when he did betray that trust, it hurts so much more.
Mm. What does that look like for you, though? Like, if you were to go back, what
Yeah.
does it look like not to trust yourself? Like, what are you telling yourself when you're not trusting yourself?
I'm that I have to be wrong. That I have, the way I'm feeling about a certain situation was irrational, or if I feel like if I make this choice, then everyone else around me, including my husband at the time, would think of me badly or wrong, or
Mm.
it's not against, it's against society's, way of moving. So I always would trust someone else's thought process. And I think that's a big problem nowadays is that we're trusting someone else's thought process instead of our own.
Yeah. Do you think, because I think it goes back to what I said, right? Because trust is a precursor of action,
Yeah,
right? You have to believe in you, you have to believe in your capability,
right,
and you have to believe in the process. You have to also believe in the environment. Is it safe for me to act, right? Is this the right place for me to say something or do something? And if one of those are compromised, there is no action.
right.
And so there may be there, and, you know, jump in. Was there a time where you didn't feel capable of doing something? And so you said, I'm going to trust this other person because they're more capable of that than me.
And again, it stems from childhood, right? So even I may have trusted myself initially, that was not something that I could do in my parental dynamic. Even if I had an emotion or a feeling or whatever, I or that I wanted to do something, I had to clear it with my parents first. I had to clear it with my mom first. So I want to do this. I want to go to my friend's house. I want to go to this. And I didn't have those decision-making abilities on anything. So I learned very early on that I had to go to someone else to make decisions. And it just carried through. It wasn't like, hey, well, you're an adult now. Now it's time for you to make your own decisions. I'm like, I've never done this before. I don't know how to do that. So I'm going to listen to everyone else around me, the people that I'm with, the friends, you have this cacophony of noise, when it comes to decisions that you're trying to make for yourself.
Wow.
Everyone's got an opinion,
You said
so
that so beautifully. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
no, 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 that's okay.
You said that so beautifully because I never really thought about that, because I too left my home to build a home. So I was living with my parents when I got married. And I think not having a transition in between, you go from trusting somebody to make decisions to another person making decisions. So for me, it was very similar because it's like somebody always had a saying, or I had to ask permission for somebody for me to do something. And so when I got married, it just got transferred to my husband. Now I have to ask and I don't make my own decisions. Wow. Thank you for like clarifying that even for myself because you don't understand that the lack of decision or the lack of trusting in self continues unless you learn somewhere along the way that you can also trust yourself. Wow, that's incredible. And it can actually translate in areas, right? It doesn't have to be in all areas.
Right,
I remember when I started making my own money, I trusted myself in making money. I trusted myself in making decisions about school, but then I didn't trust myself in things at home because at home the dynamic was different. I was trusting somebody else. And so I think you brought up this so beautifully is that we have to be able to allow ourselves to trust us in many different areas of our lives.
right,
We do learn to trust ourselves in things that we do separately or alone. But in those other things where we didn't learn to trust ourselves, we will continue to be in that place unless we learn it somehow.
right.
That's beautiful.
And how do you become aware that you don't trust yourself?
Yeah, that's hard to tell, right? I think it's circumstantial,
It
wouldn't
could
you
be.
say?
Yeah.
Because it depends on what happens in your life. Sometimes it's an actual loss. Somebody lose somebody and go, I didn't know how to do any of it. I'm going to have to learn it because that person is no longer here. So sometimes it's a loss that will take you to act. And I didn't trust myself before, but now I have no choice, or they believe they have no choice but to trust themselves. Or the way that they live, it starts to bug them. It starts to really like, I really don't like this and I don't know why.
Yeah.
And so
Crossroad moment.
yeah, so it's kind of
Yep.
exactly the crossroad moments, right? Because it's like I've been doing this all my life and I was okay before, but
No.
now I really don't like it. I
Right.
really don't want to stay like this. And so you feel like there's something missing, right? And those
Mhm.
are, just some examples that's the only way that then you're like start to become aware of the reality that there was no trust before. And somehow you have to start developing your own capabilities to start trusting yourself.
Absolutely. Here's another thing. If you're always overthinking things, so you start with a thought, and that thought just gets buried, and you start ruminating on it, and it's something. So you may have already received internal intuition that says, okay, this is the right way to go. And you're like, oh, I can't because if that happens, then this happens. And if that happens, then that. And you're constantly going on this roller coaster ride with this. You're not trusting your own self in making decisions. So what do? You call everyone you can, you ask for advice, you seek someone else's opinion on things. But what at the core of this is that you're afraid that you're going to make the wrong decision because you're not trusting what it is that is coming to you.
Wow. I love talking to you. You already know that, but
It's
this
something I
brings
took some time for me to learn, but I had to. It's the overthinking was massive. And I go, why is this happening? This is like
This is so interesting that you're saying that because I was in a friendship before where the exact thing was happening. I
Yeah,
felt like this person was constantly asking everybody else what their opinion was. There was a part of me that really appreciated it because it was almost like maybe I don't want to act out of impulse. And so I'm going to see other people's perspective. And that's one way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it is what you just said. When people don't trust themselves to make a decision, or they're so afraid that the decision will be wrong, right? Or that they think that their decision is going to make them fail or it's going to be unsuccessful, then they start going to other people for their opinions. It's almost like you also want to take out the blame, right? Because self-trust is a lot of responsibility. And we talked about it like just recently, right? On accountability. So self-trust has a lot of that too, because when you trust yourself to make the decision, like I said, there's always a risk.
right.
There's a risk when you when you trust yourself to make a decision. It could go either way, right? But when you don't trust yourself, that you don't trust in your capability of making that decision, then you put on other people so that if that decision doesn't occur, like if the result is not what you were expecting, then you don't feel as bad because it didn't come entirely from you.
Well, you
Or,
said it was okay, like,
right. Or
you're
somebody told me to do it. So I don't feel
right.
that bad because it wasn't like coming from me. But then you take that self-trust away from yourself. And now you're not really trusting yourself. You're always trusting others because there's something about your self-trust that is missing. It's almost like I'm not capable of making my own decisions. I need others to make this decision for me before I formulate my decision. So there's
Yeah,
good and bad in asking for
very true.
advice. Yeah. But it's
Very, very
really
true.
beautiful what you brought to light because I understand that a little bit more now. I feel like there's a lot of lack of self-trust when people don't want to make mistakes all the time.
It
I think,
runs rampant, the not having or having low self-trust, right? I mean, when we're always looking for someone else, to tell us what's right, it's removing our muscle, our self-trust muscle. We stay in unhealthy situations longer. Sometimes it becomes that we ignore like red flags. We ignore like things that are like screaming in our face because we're like, well, that person said it was okay. Meanwhile, all your whole body is like, no, like
yeah,
don't
give
do
us an
it.
example so that people can like visualize what that looks like.
Okay.
What does that look like?
So it could be as simple. Your friends call you up and say, I really want to go to out to dinner. Would you come with me? And you're like, I'm feeling really sick right now. I really don't want to go. And they go, oh, come on, you gotta come out with us. And you're like, fine, I'll go. And you end up going to this restaurant. Meanwhile, or you have the flu, right? Like you're in the beginnings of feeling sick, but your body is already telling you that you need rest and you need to not go, but you betray yourself to and you go and you make yourself sicker. That's just like one small little, example. Or it could have led to something that, was not a good situation for you. Maybe you drank too much and that made you feel bad. Yeah, I mean, not listening to your own intuition to say, I need rest at this moment, or I need peace at this moment, or I need, it is honoring yourself when those flags come up, when you go, I really should be saying no right now, or I really need to be honoring my own peace right now. And you do something in the opposite direction anyway, because you don't want to disappoint the other people around you. It's just one small example.
That's a great example. Thank you for bringing that up because that makes me curious now. would you say that trust, when you lack trust, self-trust, you lack boundaries? People that have a lot of boundaries, they have a lot of self-trust. Like, I don't know if that's correlated or not,
It
but
is
that's what I'm
so
hearing.
correlated. It is so correlated because when you are setting, if you have no boundaries, that means everyone else can influence you and you're not even paying attention. There's no awareness of what's going on, right? You just go with whatever. You feel awful. You feel, off. You don't exactly know why. And setting up boundaries is the perfect way. And boundaries don't have to be like, I'm never going to talk to you again. It is, I am going to set this up so I have self-preservation. And that is the perfect way to honor your own intuition and self-trust.
That's beautiful because I never thought about that because intuition, then you were saying, is related to your self-trust.
Absolutely.
Like it's guiding you to trust or not to trust a situation. It's almost like there's something more almost like energetic.
Language. Intuition is the language of self-trust. It is your own ability to speak to yourself to say, this isn't good, or this is great, or follow this, or move in this direction, and following yourself and how you feel is so important. So important.
That's beautiful. Wow. Like so much more is coming out of this conversation. I love this. I read, Marina, that there's two types of trust. There's the cognitive based trust, which is focused on reliability. It's basically, can I rely on you?
Yeah,
Can I trust you to do something? So it's more related to reliability. Is this person capable of doing it in the first place? And then there's the emotional based trust, which is, does this person care? Like if I tell them, do they care about it? So their trust is more related to, will they care? What, like, how do you see the two?
I think it's hand in hand. I think the cognitive is important because it is the rational. It is can this person physically do what it is that I am asking them to do? Where when you're talking about it from emotional is, can this person satisfy my emotional need? So it's just two sides of the coin here.
Yeah, yeah. I think the emotional one is really safety. I mean,
Yeah.
actually, they're both safety, but one, I would say the emotional based trust is psychological safety.
Yeah,
Do I have emotional safety, or does this person have a safe space for me to share?
right,
It's more of a safe space psychologically speaking. And the cognitive one for me is the physical safety.
right.
Do they have the capability of physically doing it? Is it a safe to perform this? Yes or no?
Yeah,
So it all comes back to safety. And obviously, I need to bring this up because I'm a former safety manager. I've done
yes,
this for a long time in biotech.
yes,
And, in safety, it's really the management of trust in uncertainty. When you're writing programs for something that can be deemed as unsafe, making drugs, um, transferring big pieces of equipment with a crane. And so all of those things are deemed unsafe. And so you have to put controls in place in order to make it safer or deemed safer, right?
yes,
It all depends on people's level of tolerance. But that's not very different in real, in like social life. Because when people feel like they're not safe in a certain environment, they also put up walls,
yeah,
right? They put up walls, they put up controls or what they believe to be, I'm going to protect myself. And you kind of talked about that, which is the boundary.
right.
When you don't feel safe in an environment, you put boundaries, right? You set boundaries. Those are the walls, those are the control systems, in an environment.
Yeah,
So you still, because there is some level of uncertainty, It's really your level of trust in that uncertainty. Am I able to trust this unknown situation? Well, it depends. It depends on the people, it depends on the process, it
Right.
depends on the capability. If you feel like the person is completely able or capable, reliable, and you feel like they care, that if something goes wrong, they will say something, that's full trust. I feel like one cannot live without the other, right?
Exactly.
And I think that that's what happens, for example, when there is lack of trust, is when you know a person is capable of handling it, but your trust is broken when they're not able, when something happens and they completely go away, give up, right? It's because now you're feeling wondering, did they care? Did they
Right.
care about me? Did they care about the
Right.
relationship? And so it's that emotional safety that you assume was there because you had all of the other evidence that there could be trust there,
Right.
right? And so let's talk about this a little bit because I think actions and behaviors increase people's trust. When
Right.
you see somebody show up every day for you, when you see that they care, that they bring you things, right? That they are listening to you, it builds trust, right? So the more evidence that you have that someone cares about you, that you can rely on them, that you say, in a marriage, that, if you say, can you do this? You know it's going to be done. Hey,
Right.
can you pay this bill? That you know it's going to be done. Hey, can you pick up the kid today? And you
Right.
know it's going to be done. There's like
Right.
this trust that the person is able to do things, but also, can I trust you with my heart? Can I
Right.
open up about something?
Right.
And so when there's one but there isn't the other, it's very, very hard. Somebody can actually trust people with their emotional situations, behaviors, right? You might be in a relationship where you feel very safe opening up. Oh, my mom used to do X, Y, and Z, and my family is like this. But then you say, hey, can you pick up the kid? And they will forget. Hey, can you pay this bill? You look and I get an overdue. So you can rely on them in something, but not in another thing. And so now your trust is like shaken,
Yeah.
right? What's
Yeah.
another example? Like, do you agree with that?
No, I totally agree with you. And you said something so beautiful here. And I think that when you're in a beginning a relationship and you could either want to do one or two things. Trust them wholeheartedly right to be in the beginning, which is normally not what happens, but let's just say a trust needs to be built. Trust needs to be earned. Trust needs to be tested. So when you start a relationship, you will assume that they're going to do this and you test them a little bit. Okay, they passed that test. You're not doing it intentionally, but you're asking them, "Can you come pick me up at noon?" And you show up at noon. Okay, I can trust this person to be punctual. Oh, can you pick me up at noon? Sorry, I didn't show up until 2 o'clock. That's something I can't trust him to do. You start playing these little games here and there just to see how far you can trust this person. And that's generally what we do in most relationships is that we try to test certain things, certain avenues and boundaries to see where they are reliable and where they're not.
Interesting, because you're right. I think most people will say that trust is earned. And I think I want to talk a little bit more about that if that has to do with self-trust.
Yeah.
Because when you have a high self-trust, you tend to highly trust others as well
Yeah.
because you trust yourself. When you have self-doubts about your own trust, that's when you have doubts about other people's ability to also be trusted.
Right.
Some people think trust is earned. I think trust is always available. I
Yeah.
never think trust, but that's just another opinion, right? So, in my view, trust is never earned. Trust is already available. It's only when you have evidence that trust is now no longer available because of whatever situation, the result was not what I anticipated. Now I can doubt my trust.
Right.
But to be completely honest, the way I go about it in any relationship, work or otherwise, is I always trust because you were hired because you have some sort of competency. I fell in love with you because you had some sort of competency. So for me, trust was never earned. Trust was already there. And then if it doesn't happen, now I actually have evidence
Evidence. Yeah.
that this trust did not result in something positive. And now you're like more reserved. But for me, it's always available. But maybe it has to do with my ability to trust myself. But I can agree with you. A lot of people do think, and I have worked with a lot of people in the workplace that think the same way. I
Right.
need to I let me see if I can trust this person or not. I have people that have actually tell me things about either a coworker or a situation that is happening to test if I will break their trust by telling a story to somebody else because they think that trust is earned. So I'm going to test to see if I can trust this person first before I can trust them. So you're right. Like people navigate through trust very differently.
Well,
But
let's
I,
tie it back to the beginning, though, because it's just how you were brought up and how you have your own self-trust. If you can never trust anyone growing up, you're going to continue to not trust as your first line of defense. If you have had a situation in growing up that you were able to trust the people around you, then generally you would trust right away first and then get the evidence that it's no trust. So it really is just two sides, two ways of thinking with trust. And again, it just starts with what we were taught initially.
yeah, or even later in life,
It's
there's people
possible,
that,
yeah.
yeah, there's people that maybe, were very trustworthy in the beginning. And then when they were teenagers, something happened and then they were no longer able to
Right.
trust, right? It doesn't have to be just when they were growing up. It could be any traumatic event that the person
Absolutely.
have gone through that now they don't feel like they can trust. I feel like I was a very trustworthy person growing up, and then I moved to another country at 16. And as an immigrant, I felt like I couldn't trust no one, but there was a fear behind it.
Right.
There was fear of rejection and not being accepted. And so, because of a traumatic change, or I would say drastic, sometimes it's not
Yeah.
traumatic, or it is traumatic for some. So when it's like a really drastic change that happens, that can also bring a lot of lack of trust.
Right.
Even when you did initially trust yourself, you can be all of a sudden in a situation where you don't trust yourself at all. You
Mm,
know,
true.
it really depends on, again, the level of uncertainty. When the level of uncertainty is so high, when you're no longer feel like you're capable of doing it, when you no longer know the process, now you no longer trust yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's when, for most people, when they start somewhere new, they have to rely on somebody else for trust. When you start at a new job and you don't know anything, you don't have capability there yet, even though you have your own capabilities. You don't know the system yet, even though you know some systems. So now
Right.
you're kind of forced to rely on somebody. So you go either to your boss or a coworker and you say, hey, like, how does it work here? Like, what's the culture like? Who do I trust? Who do I not trust? And then your perception start already being biased by, somebody else's level of trust. If you go into a place where you're interacting with someone who doesn't trust anyone,
Right.
that's what they're going to send it off to you. And so sometimes it's not your parents either. It's really like your community is going to teach you how to trust or not trust people.
Great, 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 great point. Great point. Because I have an example. Let's say my son, who just started an internship, and within his first week, all the people that are currently working there gave him their opinion of the place and how difficult it was for them and their stripes and he's like, oh my gosh, this is it. And I go, this is not your opinion. This is something that you need to experience and for yourself. Trust in your own thoughts and your own opinions as you start this internship, not the people that have been there, forever, because they have had their own experiences and their own things that went on and their own fights or their own, issues. You go into it fresh. Go into it like, thank you for your story. I'm going to just take this day to day and see how this goes. So it is just a matter of trusting your own opinion on things, and especially in a workplace. It's tough when you're starting, and like you said, um, because you have to trust someone else's ideas, someone else's processes, someone else's, information, and you use it as almost canon. You're like, okay, well, this is the thing, and now I have to abide by this thing. And if you could just take a pause and separate for a moment and go, I'm going to learn all this. And then once I learn it and I become comfortable with it, then I can make an assessment and do things for myself that are more aligned to how I feel goes. And then you could, at that point, help. Like I would say a week into my son's internship, he was able to say, I see that you're doing this. Here's an idea that I have. Just wanted to give it to you. Maybe you could, let me know your opinion on it. And they were like, oh, that's a fantastic idea. Thank you for sharing. Like this is just you don't have to be stuck in the just because we did it this way, or this is because, I here's my opinion, it sucks here, like, you can create your own environment and your own world.
Well, that depends. Yes, I think for yourself, you can do that. I can attest for the workplace that it's not the case sometimes, right? And in the workplace, for example, especially because you have a lot of people working with you,
Yeah.
it can be very different. I
Right.
mean, I came from, again, the safety, environmental health and safety world. And in safe management, you cannot emphasize how much you hear, well, we do it this way and it's been working for the past 20 years, because people are very resistant to change.
Right.
They don't, because when you talk about change, you talk about now you're implementing unknowns, and all of this is very familiar, right? Which is kind of funny because safe, the word safe can mean two things, right? Safe can really mean a space for you to explore with your vulnerability, or you can stay safe, which is your comfort zone,
Mm.
right? And it's the same word, which always throws me off because they mean different things. Um, and so when you're in the workplace, it's very hard to change. It's very hard to implement anything that is going to change because people have their own way of doing things, even though sometimes they don't even know why they're doing it. It's just because we've always done it this way,
Right.
right? And that's it. We've always done it this way, and we're going to continue to do it this way. The thing is, where there is no growth, you're stagnant, right? It's
Right.
one or the other. And that's for everything, our bodies, systems. If you don't grow, if you're not moving along, you're dying essentially, right? You need movement, you need growth, right? To survive. And
Yeah.
so people sometimes they would rather, no, I like this. I like the comfort zone. I like staying the same. I
Yeah.
don't want to change. And so in order to change, you have to create capacity for safety first before you actually implement the change. You have to draw a picture of what it could be. You have to show people that it is safe to maneuver to another way of doing. You have to show the reasons sometimes of what's possible and how it's beneficial to do something different, because otherwise people will stay the same way.
Yeah.
And change normally takes time. Normally when you change a process at work, you have to train. It takes time. People have to adapt to new ways, and that also takes time. And so, no, it's not very easy sometimes to just change even on your own. And I agree with you. Sometimes you have to come in and make an assessment and make your own decisions about it. But it's very hard to make it possible for other people, you know? And so I think that's why sometimes people want to impose changes without creating a safety zone first for that change to happen. And that's why people get really like afraid. They get scared of change and they don't know what that looks like in their lives. And if they already have a really hard time with self-trust, then they're going to make it harder for you to even propose change because they don't trust themselves. How
Right.
can they trust you to make the change?
We take it a next step further. You are in a place and you've been there for a while. You tried to implement, change. It's been rejected, and you have come home and you're tired and you're burnt out, and it's exhausting, and your whole body now is telling you that, you need to make changes and you need to move. You set up a boundary, right? This is where the trust, you're like, I'm going to no longer deal with this. Once that piece of information comes to you and you start trusting in how you're feeling, how your body is reacting, how exhausted you are, and all that, that is huge piece of self-trust, because someone can go through that and feel that way for a really long time, not trusting themselves in wanting to make that next move, whether it be to a different company or to a different way of uh, your different job or a different career, a different, um, so it just spurns off back into self-trust if you are constantly paying attention to what it is that you are feeling
Hmm.
and moving through, then you could easily, not easily, I use the word too often, but it's not easy, but you can at least have direction to what to do next.
Yeah. You're talking about, okay, so I was talking about a company as a
Yeah,
whole,
as a
how hard
whole.
it is to implement change in a place of work
Right,
because you have many people with different trust levels.
right,
Now you have changed it to self. There's
right,
one person there, I was one of them, who really wanted to implement change, really saw the benefit of change,
right,
but other people didn't. It wasn't other people's priorities. And now you're frustrated because what is priority to you is not priority to other people. And now you have to ask yourself, what am I willing to tolerate?
right,
Maybe you were willing to tolerate X, Y, and Z in the beginning, but now you're no longer able to tolerate because you see that what is priority to you is not priority to others. So you're talking about now self reliance on deciding what are you willing to tolerate.
right,
That's when you assess your own self trust. You know, do I continue this or do I leave or what do I do when, I assess my level of tolerance towards this? Do
right,
I tolerate staying in a position where my priorities are not aligned with other people's priorities? Do I have to change my perspective of my priority is with relation to work? Or am I really not able to tolerate this and it's time for me to move?
right.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So you to know that you have strong self-trust, um, what are some indications that you actually have a strong self-trust?
That's a beautiful question. I think for me, I can only speak for myself, right? But
Mm.
I think knowing that you have a lot of self-trust is it goes back to believing in myself, believing in my capability, and believing in the process, whatever the process may be. And
Right,
so going into those three, do I trust myself to do this? Do I trust myself to act? Do I trust my capability of moving forward? And do I believe, not trust, do I believe in my capability? And do I believe I really know the process? And I think that's another way of protection as well. When you have a lot of self-trust in yourself, you're separating your capability from you.
Right.
So you can only hurt your effort. You can't hurt yourself. So when you go into an interview and you don't get the job, maybe your capability did not match their needs. Maybe you knew a process, but they wanted you to know a specific process. So my capability did not match theirs, not me. And
Right.
so I think having self-trust too and knowing the difference between like I trust my capabilities or I can improve my capabilities, but that has nothing to do with me. And so having self-trust is really the ability to separate the two, to separate how I trust versus me.
Yeah, I like that. And from a, like a self perspective, like you said, it's believing that you can handle something, right? And even for myself, it was like listening to my own intuition and trusting the guidance that I was getting from myself. So by doing that, and it takes time, and you have to really put faith that your own intuition, your own trust in how you're moving through this life, um, is the right one. And let's just say it's not the right one. It's okay because you can do something else. That's what self-trust is about, is like knowing that you're not going to die from it, that you would be able to handle whatever it is that comes up, afterwards. This is
Mm,
a big thing because you may say, this feels really good right now. This is what I'm doing, and this is what I feel aligned to. And you could make a change. And that's okay to make a change if it no longer feels the same way. You could make an adjustment and it not be the end of the world. So that was gigantic for me, to be able to learn how to do that and trust it.
yeah, I would say trust more the values. I would go more to the values than what I feel because I won't feel great all the time. And if I had to evaluate everything I do based on my feelings, I wouldn't do half of the stuff that I do because sometimes you have feelings of discourage, you have, and then especially women that are heavily influenced by their hormones. So even when you feel like you're not going to do it, that doesn't mean you should follow your emotions because your feelings will tell you otherwise. Your feelings will convince you not to do it. Your feelings will actually try to convince you not to trust yourself, which I feel like that's why it goes back to values versus emotions. Because when you know what your values are and you trust that in the long run, it will be beneficial for who you are and your values, that's even more important than your emotions because your emotions can go up and down and up and down. But if you are doing it off of your values, that's important. And I'll give you an example. So I remember back in 2020, I was applying for a job and I had three jobs lined up. I was doing interviews with three different companies. And one of the companies, based on the interview that I was having, I wrote down on a piece of paper, do not go to this company for whatever it is that they were, the way they were talking to me and what they were saying. I was like, don't go to this company. And I did the interview with the other two, but I didn't get an acceptance letter from the other two. And I got an offer from the one that I said,
Mm.
don't go. And it was the only offer I had. And so I said yes. And it was really one of the worst decisions I've made. And I think it was a lesson learned. It was important for me to go and experience it. But sometimes, like you said, your gut feeling, your intuition will tell you what to do. And sometimes we don't trust that intuition because we're prioritizing something else. In my case, I was prioritizing my bills. Like I was prioritizing financial security over what I really wanted. And I think people do that all the time when, you know, it's not that they don't trust themselves, but they let go of what they trust. They let go of trusting their gut and their instinct because of a another competing priority. Have you experienced something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. what I wanted to point out, and this is it's so glad that you brought this up, was there's a difference between having an emotion and your intuition. So there's this, it's two, the voices are very different. And understanding what each of those things are takes a little time. But if it's loud, if it's fear-based, if it is anxiety-ridden, if it is heavy, that is not intuition. That is emotional dysregularity. Intuition is a quiet voice. Intuition is something that comes to you, and it feels light. It feels peaceful. It feels like for me, it is, I get chills in my body. Like I
Mm.
have asked myself, if this is right and I'm on the right path on this, I want you to give me an overwhelming sense of peace with it. When it is something that is just a reaction to um, a stimulus, then I that won't feel good. It won't feel good at all. It would feel really bad and it's going to feel really awful. And it's not something I base any decisions on. But when I sit in a peaceful space and I listen to the direction that is coming to me when I ask myself those questions. I will walk around this house, and I'm not kidding you. I will walk around this house talking to myself, asking myself questions. So is eating this brownie a really good thing right now? Gosh, it's not. No. Like there's things that the conversations that I have with myself, but that is an important distinction, is that running your decisions based on emotion is not what I'm talking about. This is when you sit
Yeah.
in this intuitive state and it's not a loud fear voice. This is a very nice quiet one.
Yeah.
And anxiety, intuition obviously is two opposite ends of the
Right.
spectrum with this.
Yeah. I think Martha Beck, going back to her, also says something on her book about that. And I love it because
Yeah.
she says the difference between fear with excitement and a voice that is pulling you forward versus fear where it's actually pulling you completely away.
Right.
And the way she describes it is when you are in front of a pool. When you're in front of a pool, there's that fear, but it's mixed with excitement. It's like I'm fear because it's cold, but I'm excited because this is going to be fun.
Yes.
So there's a fear that comes, but it's not a fear that is stopping you from going. It's a fear that is kind of mixed with excitement.
Yeah.
And then there's another fear when the pool is dirty or when the pool, there's something in there. Then now it's a fear, but it's not mixed with excitement. It's the fear of like, don't do it. Something is not right about this water. And so now the instinct is going to be fear and not good as opposed to fear and excitement,
Yes.
right? And I think that's the difference between the two. I think that example was so good.
That is a great example. That is a phenomenal example. But that's it. Here is the other thing too. Sometimes our body will react to things before our mind does. Suddenly we're feeling nauseous about something. Sometimes we're getting a massive headache. Maybe it is, you get lightheaded for no reason and you're like, I'm in a really stressful situation. Sometimes your body does react. So paying attention to all levels as you're making decisions or going through is huge.
Yeah. And some people can hear it louder than other people.
True.
I certainly, the more that I practice listening to my body, the more I'm able to listen to my body. So I would say if somebody wants to learn about their gut feeling and their intuition, just practice. Every time you feel something, just obey it right away. Because it's also really hard. You know, I used to go against my gut feeling and it will get me to not great places. But now sometimes it's either like it's as small as you need to go now, or no, you're not going to take your kid this place. And I have no idea why. Like,
Right.
I seriously have no idea. Like, if I had a gut feeling that we should not go to this place, like, I don't know, it could be a birthday party, it could be an event that I'm like excited about, and then I get this feeling like, don't go. I don't even know what the reason is. I just go, we're not going. I can't explain what it is. Something in my gut, we shouldn't go. And
Self-trust
and
in
I just,
action.
trust that feeling that it's not because it doesn't come every day. It's not something that, like it happens all the time. And so when it does happen and it's that strong, I almost hear it loudly in my ear. I trust it, you know.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's again, that's self-trust in action. That's exactly it. This is where that those gut feelings, your body is feeling something and your mind is now connected to it. Once you have that connection, you go, okay, I'm not going to go to this place. Or you know what, I'm not going to, you know, eat this thing. Or, I'm not going to challenge myself here because it's definitely not something that I think is going to be good for me. You
Yeah.
make those decisions and trust what it is that's coming to you.
Yeah. So before I go, I want to like just, for people that want to read and learn about trust,
Yes.
I do have a few books on self, personal development and coaching from a few people that I think it would be helpful for them. So I have a list here. So one is Brene Brown. She has two books actually that talks about vulnerability, which is huge in trust. You have to be vulnerable in order to trust people. And Daring Greatly is one of her books where she explore again vulnerability and shame as foundations of connection, hence trust. And the Atlas of the Heart, which maps emotions to cultivate meaningful relationships. There's the Thin Book of Trust by Charles Feltman, which is a framework of building trust as a workplace competency. There's a Stephen Covey, The Speed of Trust and Trust and Inspire, which is about reshaping how leaders think about relationships and performance. And then the last one is Trust by Henry Cloud, which outlines the elements like understanding motives, the ability, character, and track records as pillars of trust.
Perfect. Do you think we can add that to in
Yeah,
the
we'll add that to our description so that
yeah,
people can
maybe we
take
can
a
add that
look.
to our description just so people have that.
Yeah,
Because those are great suggestions, especially on this topic for sure.
yeah. So, I mean, I trust you. I love the idea. I think we have established trust between the two of us
Yes.
because we're, I guess, very similar in some ways and very opposite, but the other ways. But
That's what
I
makes it
think
beautiful.
part of the trust is also the ability to show up for one another.
Absolutely.
Right from the start, we were really reliable in the things that we said we were going to do. We trusted the energy more than people can understand, or
True.
some people will. I think, there was this energy that really completely gravitated towards you from me. And there were multiple evidences afterwards on the way that we speak to ourselves, the way that we talk about ourselves, the way that we trust with our own personal lives. And I think that that's huge in friendship. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I really value that. And I think, it's one thing that we didn't really talk about is the trust in friendships and how important that is. Some people are able to go through really hard times in life because they trust their friendships and they have a friend to, next to them or by their sides
Yeah.
when they need the most. So I
Yeah.
don't know if you want to close out with an example just so that we don't pass it completely.
The example is when you have someone that you trust implicitly in the same way that you trust yourself, and you're able to have a safe space to say the things, to be yourself and still feel loved and still feel accepted is a beautiful and amazing thing. So I think by allowing yourself to experience that kind of trust within a friendship, and that's in all relationships, it's rare and it's beautiful.
I agree. Oh, this is lovely. I love this topic of
It was a
trust.
great topic. Yeah.
Yeah, so many good ways of, and hopefully people can take something out of our conversation today. I know we talked a lot about trust in different areas, but it's really important to trust you, right? Before you trust
Yeah,
anybody else, and the way you trust yourself is
yeah,
going to reflect on the way you trust others. So,
absolutely.
all right, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good week. Bye.